Welcome back to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Monday, June 6, 2011. The National Hurricane Center is still monitoring 94L Invest, or the broad 1007 millibar low pressure area located in the western Caribbean. The latest outlook gives this system about a 50% chance of forming into a tropical depression or tropical storm within the next 48 hours. Here is the latest Atlantic visible imagery. As you can see, this very broad area of low pressure remains widely disorganized. There are still a lot of competing areas of circulation. Yesterday evening, we still had a mid-level circulation located just south of Jamaica. It looked like there was a chance that that one could become the more dominant storm center overnight, but apparently this has begun to dissipate over the afternoon hours, whereas the primary area of low pressure that we've been monitoring for the past week is still holding steady out here over the western Caribbean just to the northeast of Honduras, and that still appears to be where any tropical cyclone formation would occur if it indeed did decide to happen. Here is the latest enhanced infrared, and as you can see, there's really no concentrated area of convection just yet. We still have some remnant convection located near the original mid-level circulation that popped up yesterday afternoon into the evening hours. We do see a greater concentration perhaps now trying to develop around the low-level circulation, although it remains very broad in nature and there really is a lack of spiral bands at this current time. And that is due to the continuing presence of wind shear. As mentioned over the last 3 or 4 days, upper level conditions have become gradually more favorable, but they're still not the most favorable conditions that one could anticipate for tropical development. We still have some moderate southwest shear, especially over the northwest Caribbean, and that's in response to the presence of the upper level low that's continued to sit over much of the central Gulf of Mexico. And out ahead of this low, we still have some southwest winds aloft, and also some dry air entrainment is being funneled into the low-level circulation. Thus, it's very difficult for this system to maintain persistent convection in one area for an extended period of time. Here is a more zoomed-in floater visible image of this particular system, and as you can see, the mid-level circulation is still trying to hang on near Jamaica as it drifts off toward the northeast. But if you look at the low-level cloud features, they're really trying to concentrate and circulate in this general region just west of 80 degrees west longitude, perhaps closer to 81 to 82 degrees west. And we're still not seeing a strong concentration of thunderstorms near the center. The latest morning satellite pass does confirm the presence of a low-level circulation in this general location, although it is very broad in nature and also very weak. Here you can see this is where it would be located. The surface winds, at least picked up by the satellite, are not all that intense. We're seeing winds no more than 20 to 25 knots, and this surface circulation is very broad in nature and it's oriented from north to south at the current time. Also, here's a look at the latest SIMS 850 millibar vorticity analysis, and the highest vorticity is concentrated exactly where we would imagine it to be based on the latest visible floater. And here is the latest shear analysis. The good news for this system is that the upper level ridge is located almost directly over the low level circulation, but as noted in the water vapor imagery, we still have that broad area of upper level troughiness not too far away. Thus the reason why we still have 20 to 50 knots of wind shear just to the storm's northwest, so that is still a problem. As far as the low-level steering is concerned, we still haven't seen much change in that just yet. We still have the broad trough over the central Atlantic, followed up by the subtropical ridge over the southeast United States. Down south, our broad monsoon low feature is still stuck between these two areas, but a continued drift toward the west or northwest should be anticipated over the next 1 to 2 days. This is the latest 12Z run of the Tropical Model Suite. As you can see, several of the model members are still all over the place, ranging from as far west as the western Gulf of Mexico to as far east as near Bermuda by 120 hours. Overall, however, the consensus is still over the southeast Gulf of Mexico, but we still need to keep an eye on the possibility of this storm moving off toward the Bahamas, although at this time it looks like the southeast Gulf of Mexico is still the most likely bet, although this is a very complicated setup, and I'll go into more of that as we look into more specific model guidance. Here is the latest 12Z GFS forecast. As I set this into motion, the broad area of low pressure really does not intensify much at all through the period. If anything, the low detaches and breaks off into two segments. You have one area of broad low pressure continuing toward the northwest into the central Gulf of Mexico, while a secondary piece of vorticity begins to branch out toward the north, and as you can see, by 120 hours we see that over the Bahamas until it begins to dissipate. The low-level vorticity analysis also confirms the same thing. We have a broad area of vorticity going into the central Gulf of Mexico, while a secondary area gets sheared off toward the northeast and a more northerly or poleward movement begins to commence as it moves on into the southwest. So why is this model practically spitting or splitting our disturbance in half? Well, if we look at the latest shear forecast, we'll notice that the upper level low is actually forecast to remain in place based on the GFS model. Now, if this forecast were to verify, then once the broad area of low pressure begins to move more northerly, then it's going to simply be sheared apart. If anything, we may see a weak surface reflection or a very weak area of surface low pressure continue and move into the central Gulf of Mexico based on the low-level steering, but all of the mid to upper level part of the system is going to be sheared to pieces and then shunted off toward the northeast into southern Florida and the Bahamas. Interestingly enough, the latest 12Z Canadian run is in very similar agreement with the GFS model. The Canadian is no longer showing rapid development. In fact, it doesn't develop the storm at all. And as you can see, much like the GFS, it splits the storm into two, with a weak low passing into the central Gulf, with another piece turning into the West Atlantic. Much like the GFS, the Canadian model is now keeping the area of troughiness and strong vertical wind shear over much of Cuba, Florida, and the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So just why are these models keeping the wind shear in place over the foreseeable future? Well, as noted in the prior water vapor imagery of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, we still have persistent troughing down toward the lower half of this image thanks to this upper level low. But if we look carefully over the eastern half of the United States, we have reinforcing shots of troughiness entering the picture, and that's going to begin to weaken the subtropical ridging over the eastern United States, and it's being replaced by this strong troughiness over much of the eastern Gulf, and as a result of that, the wind shear values should remain fairly high. Here is the latest 12Z ECMWF run, and as you can see, the model correctly initializes our tropical low at 1007 millibars. That's in agreement with the latest National Hurricane Center estimate. And as we advance this into the future, you'll notice that the mid-level ridging over much of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley really begins to decrease day by day. This is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. As you can see, the main core of ridging is now off to the east over the central Atlantic, while we have more prominent troughiness beginning to develop over the central United States. As a result, our weak area of low pressure continues to move now more toward the north, and by 120 hours or day 5, you see the weak surface reflection now passing over extreme southern Florida near Lake Okeechobee. And this is really not a classified tropical cyclone at all. In fact, it's a fairly weak area of low pressure, and hopefully it would provide southern Florida with some much needed rainfall, but that is about the extent of it based on this latest model solution. As you can see, much of Florida, and especially southeast Florida, is experiencing some fairly tough drought conditions. The 12Z UK Met model is also in general agreement with the others. Here's the current time, and as we advance this forward, day 1, day 2, day 3, and quickly changing sources, but sticking to the UK Met model, this is day 4. We now have the weak 1007 millibar low passing over western Cuba, and by day 5, it is now passing over much of southern Florida, and by day 6, it's beginning to move up the east coast as a very weak low pressure area. So, just to summarize, 94L still has a brief chance of becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm over the next 48 hours. Thus the reason why the National Hurricane Center is maintaining that 50% chance of that occurring. But in the medium range, as this system begins to inch closer to the Florida Peninsula, vertical wind shear is expected to remain high in areas that far north. Thus, even if this storm did intensify into a weak tropical storm, it would most likely be sheared apart very quickly and then dissipate. The more than likely outcome is that this storm will provide at least some rainfall for the Florida Peninsula, Cuba, and into the Bahamas. But the extent of that rainfall is unknown, and that'll be something that we'll have to continue to monitor. And as always, this is the tropics, so I advise everyone to just keep an eye on things day by day. But so far, this does not look like this is going to be much of a significant weather system at all. So thanks again for visiting 28storms.com. Again, please go ahead and try to follow us on YouTube, our YouTube channel, along with our Facebook, because not only do we make these videos, but we also post frequent updates on those networks from day to day and hour by hour, not only with tropical weather, but also United States severe weather, so our viewers may find that useful. So that's it for now. Thanks again for checking out 28storms.com.